What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackmine, joined by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk, or subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, we are one day into week 2 of organized team activities, and man, the headlines, they are flying in fast and furious. We got conversations about the Pittsburgh Steelers possibly having the best cornerback in the NFL, at least declared by, well, that cornerback. Meanwhile, a former Baltimore Ravens safety has come out of retirement. And the big question is, should the Pittsburgh Steelers make a phone call and see if he is available and wants to come back to the AFC North? And after seemingly months of just everybody having hot takes about Russell Wilson, it's time to really dive into it and say, is there any chance that the Pittsburgh Steelers change their mind about their quarterback system heading into the 2024 season? It's been a good week here in the city of Pittsburgh. It's great to be out there at practice, even if there's not, a ton going on and it is OTAs. It just feels nice to have a little bit of football. How you feeling, my friend?
I feel great. I totally agree. Like, being able to actually watch some people play some football, to have some actual stuff to grab onto, really does wonders for you. Like this, we were talking about it the other day, but once you hit that July period, like, things get real dead. You get real desperate to actually watch some people throw the football, catch a football, play some kind of defense at all. So I'm savoring every moment that we get out there because, by the time, we hit the middle of the summer, I'm going to be really missing it.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, the news obviously broke yesterday. Me and you were talking about it a little bit after we left OTAs of the NFL looking to change the schedule and kind of give the break in May and then start early at the end of June, go right through July. Your thoughts if the Steelers, or not the Steelers, but the NFL kind of change their way about things, kind of leave us with almost nothing going on after the NFL draft until the end of June. You think that's better, worse, the same? What are your thoughts there for the fans' perspective?
Well, I think from the fans' perspective, it gets like real football started sooner, which I think is a positive. I think, from a guy, like, as someone who watches kind of multiple sports and multiple leagues and like follows a bunch of different stuff, like that July period can be kind of dead. But like, terrible. May has a little bit more going on. So, from a viewing perspective, like, you don't really hate the idea that you're filling a month where there's usually only baseball going on with some football, something different to kind of mix it up. From like a players and coaches perspective, I don't know. I feel like you would want, because I mean, like, look, you start OTAs at the beginning of July or something like that, and then you run all the way through, assuming you make the playoffs or make the Super Bowl, through to February or January. I mean, that's
6 months.
Yeah, 6 or 7 months. Yeah, that's a 7-month long season. That's a little crazy. And I mean, if the reports are true about them maybe going to an 18 game season, like, that's going to extend it even further. Like, that doesn't seem particularly ideal either, to make guys go through a 7-month season of, the most grueling sport that we could possibly imagine. So I don't know. It seems like a lot. It just seems like a marathon that the NFL doesn't really need at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously the NFL is going to do what draws more attention and makes them more money. That's what the NFL is built off of. I agree with you from the fans' perspective. Like, for us, for people who cover the sport, who are there, it's tough to go through, like, at least in July, like, most people take vacations. That's when you're kind of chilling. You're finding time to go spend time with loved ones, or go hit the beach, or do whatever you want to do. For us, it's usually go home to our families for at least a week, a couple of days, to go see some people, because we're not from the city of Pittsburgh. But I mean, you could do that in May. Like, that's not terribly difficult. I think the side of it for the fans is, it makes a lot of sense. Just, drool it out, get through it, do what you got to do, suffer through the nothing, and then boom, you got a bunch of football ahead of you. And I think that's worth it. For the players' perspective, I agree with you 100%. I doubt that there is a player who's excited to start OTAs in June and then have to go right through, especially because, like, think about how terrible that is. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers player, you start in June, you go 3 weeks of organized team activities, which nobody is going to show up to anymore. Nobody. That is, you will get every veteran being like, I'm good, pal. That's not happening. Then minicamp, Then you head to Latrobe. You have now practiced 3 weeks in a row. You've already pretty much avoided your family and all loved ones. And you now head to Latrobe where you spend an entire month and then you start the NFL season. Like, I don't know, tough times if you're a guy like that. And if you're a different team, like there's no break between, you're traveling. I think that's the part that comes into play. If you're a team that goes to a different state, like the Dallas Cowboys who go to California, and you don't have a downtime before that, you have nothing to like adjust yourself, you go straight from OTAs and minicamp to, okay, I'm on a plane on Friday, practice starts on Monday. That's just, I don't know. I don't think players are going to be super excited about it. I mean, for us, like we hit a point in May where you're like, okay, I need football, like I need something to talk about. And then we're going to dive into some crazy hot takes. Like that's what's going to come out of this is just a billion times more hot takes because nothing's going to be going on. So the conversations of benching Russ and benching Justin Fields and is Mike Tomlin on the hot seat, like they're going to be triple next year because people are just going to have nothing to talk about, like nothing whatsoever. But again, we'll see. 18-game season, I think, is inevitable for the NFL. I think at some point we'll be looking at a 20-game season for the Steelers and the rest of the league, but we'll get there when the time comes. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Made a couple of headlines yesterday. The biggest one, I think, is Joey Porter Jr., who told The Athletic's Mark Kaboly that who's the best cornerback in the NFL? It's him. Quote, there are a lot of good DBs in the league. Nobody was doing what I was doing going against wide receiver ones the entire year and locking him down. I don't care if I am mentioned in there or not because they are going to hear my name eventually. You hear that, you hear the confidence, Joey Porter Jr. I think that plays a major role here is to know who Joey Porter Jr. is, to have those personal conversations with him. You hear that come out of his mouth. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, my first thought was this isn't really the Joey Porter that we know. I think the Joey Porter that, I think back to the first time that you kind of spoke to him. He spoke to the wider media, especially the media in Pittsburgh. It was at the NFL Combine, I guess now 2 years ago. You come back from that interview and you're like, wow, Joey Porter is like the nicest kid that I've ever heard from. Like soft-spoken, you could tell, like not afraid of the limelight, but, just didn't want to be, in the spotlight. I think he wanted to keep his head down a little bit, build his own reputation, not just be Joey Porter Jr.'s son. But this is very different. And it makes me think that there is a certain former NFL defensive back in his ear telling him, hey, you've been too nice, man. Like if you're going to be a number one corner in the NFL, you got to be able to talk some trash. You got to be able to, I don't know, promote yourself, to play with an attitude a little bit. And it seems like that's what Joey's trying to take into this season. And personally, I love it. Like, I think who cares if he's actually the best cornerback in the NFL or not? Like, if you want to be one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, if you want to have those aspirations to be an elite player, I think you got to have this kind of confidence, especially at corner. I think everywhere you do, but particularly at corner. Like in the grand scheme of things, like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like the screenshot of that quote is going to get, posted to him on social media or something. Like it's going to get thrown in his face every once in a while if he gives up a big play or loses a game or something like that. But like no one's going to remember this, 2-3 months down the road. It's not going to matter. And if the worst thing about it is he gets some mean tweets on social media, that's fine. I would rather him have that. I would rather him have more confidence than he maybe should have than less than he should have. I think this is a better deal.
I agree. And I saw Nick Herbig share it on Instagram yesterday and he was all fired up about it. I think that's the thing is just like you said, if you're a cornerback, you got to be cocky. You got to be a dude who's full of confidence, who is probably a little bit too high on himself and his abilities. Cause I mean, it's potentially the hardest position outside of quarterback in the NFL. Like you are going against the most athletic guys on the field and you essentially have to shut them down. And that is as difficult as it comes. And I mean, to be quite honest, he backed that up last year. I don't know what comes in year two. I think there's a part of me that always worries about a sophomore slump, but at the same time, I try not to think that way. If this was, I think the part of the fan base or some people will try to compare it to Chase Claypool saying, I'm a top 5 wide receiver. And the difference is that when Chase Claypool said it, he did nothing in the NFL to prove that he's a top 5 wide receiver. Joey Porter last year, from the second he got an opportunity until the end of the season, did everything he could to keep the Pittsburgh Steelers defense elite and to make an impact and played guys that I mean, DeAndre Hopkins was the first wide receiver one that he went against ever in the NFL. Like that was the first time he locked up one-on-one. I'm not moving. You are facing me the entire game. That's a future Hall of Famer. And he shut him down. Like he right from the jump was able to do those things. I don't know if he's the best cornerback in football, but to be honest, I like that he started the conversation. I like that he tossed his name out there. I like that, before that, people are talking about Patrick Surtain and, all these names that constantly come up, even second-year guys that are very impressive. Like, people talk about Christian Gonzalez. I like that Joey Porter was like, hey, dude, look it. I deserve to be in that conversation as well. I deserve to be a guy that people are talking about as the next elite cornerback in the NFL. And just like you said, like to be that nice of a human, I think that's the big thing is Joey carries a chip, but it's a cocky, he might be a little bit cocky here, but it's not like, it's not a gassed up coming out of nowhere. I got a big head. It's I think I earned this, and I think that's the thing about working with his dad is I don't think his dad's going to let him talk smack and advise him to be a little bit more aggressive with these things unless he feels that he should be, unless he feels that he's earned the right to do those things. So I think that I think for him to say this, like, there's a part of it that you're like, oh, I kind of have to believe that maybe he is, I don't know if I feel that way, but I'm glad that he tossed his name in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it's not inconceivable that he gets there. Like, I don't think he's
exactly
the best cornerback in the NFL right now, but I can't completely rule out that he has a really fantastic sophomore season and gets put in that conversation and pushes that conversation even further. Because it's also, I think that's kind of fluid. Like, like guys, I think you look at it, guys aren't, you look at all pro teams and things like that. It's not like every year there's a Mahomes or a Lamar Jackson who's just, or an Aaron Donald, like someone that you're just never going to approach. Like this ebbs and flows, the cornerbacks list, the ranks of elite cornerbacks in the NFL. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility at all that Joey eventually gets there. And I think the first step to getting there is believing that you can get there and having the talent to get there. And Joey's got all that stuff. I think adding the confidence is just kind of one ingredient in a whole recipe where he ends up, ends up being one of the elite corners in the NFL.
I agree. I toss him on my list of potential Pro Bowlers for the Steelers this year. And I think like everybody's going to talk George Pickens. You want to toss some name out there that I think is, you want to talk about taking a step towards superstardom. Everybody's going to talk about George Pickens. I think Joey Porter might be top of that list when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers locker room because, I mean, just what he did last season was very impressive. And he's got a better defense around him this year, so I can only imagine that things are going to improve when it comes to his play and what he's capable of doing. I want to talk about another defensive back here. Former Baltimore Raven safety Tony Jefferson announced yesterday that he is coming out of retirement, according to Bleacher Report's Jordan Schultz, that he's ready to make an NFL comeback. He's 32 years old. Last time he played a full season was 2018. After that, he dealt with a torn ACL and then a foot injury that ultimately just forced him to be sidelined and, call it a career after 9 seasons. He's back. I think nobody's bringing this up, but maybe they should be. And maybe the answer is no, but I think it's a conversation worth having. Is Tony Jefferson a name that the Pittsburgh Steelers should make a phone call to and say, hey, you want to come play for us? Even if it doesn't work out, you're going to try out and maybe things work out. I don't think the Steelers secondary is really locked into a point where you could look at it and say they're not missing a piece. I think they could add a guy like Tony Jefferson and really anybody. You can name any defensive back out there, and I think you can make it make sense. Should they give Tony Jefferson a call?
Yeah, I'd absolutely give Tony Jefferson a call. I think, first of all, what you said about, the Steelers' defensive backfield not really being set. I mean, so you've got Fitzpatrick and Deshaun Elliott at the front of the room. And after that, it's DeMonte KZ and Trent Thompson and Miles Killebrew and Jalen Elliott. Like, I think there's definitely room for one more safety in that group to give you some depth, especially a veteran guy who's kind of been there and done that, has had a bunch of success in the NFL. You look at what Tony Jefferson does. Like, I think he could really fit a role. Like, as he's gotten older, as his career kind of came to what he thought was the end, in 2022 and 2021, he kind of he became a better cover guy. He was he's still a pretty sure tackler, not as much of a run stopper, but I think there's a role for that. I think there are a lot of guys here who are real good run stuffers and not great coverage dudes. So I think Jefferson, if he can kind of regain that 2022 form after a year off, I think that's really the only question. But again, this is a guy who guys who take years off from football don't break the bank. So this is going to be a really affordable option that can give you some depth, helps you sleep a little bit better at night. It's just another position that I don't think you really have to worry about if you can make an addition like this. And I think it's totally worth it to at least give him a call. You're not going to be locked into anything crazy with him contract wise. So I don't see any downside to it.
No, I agree. I look at Tony Jefferson and say, it's the same argument as any of those guys. Like, hey, go get Justin Simmons. All right, yeah, why not? Why not? There's no reason not to give somebody a call. Like the Steelers, for one, have an open locker or open spot on there. No, I guess they don't. They signed LaMichael Perrine and Jonathan Ward, so I guess that is 90. Still, not very difficult to clear a roster spot at this point in the offseason. If you want to give a guy like that a call, I think he does a bunch of things. Like just like you said, he's a sure tackler. He's gotten better in coverage, and I think even at his worst, he was still reliable in coverage. You look at him and say, if you're going to play safety, awesome, great. Now we have options to move Devontae KZ to nickel if that's what we want to do and play him as an all-around defensive back, because I think the slot cornerback role is still very much so up for debate, and I don't think that anybody's looking at it right now and saying Anthony Everett or Beanie Bishop is a lock to sit there. I mean, we're talking about Cam Sutton and Patrick Peterson left and right because at some point you got to look at it and say, that's your missing piece. Go fill your missing piece. I think he allows Devontae KZ to play that role. I think he's got an opportunity to play that role if he could play that role. I don't know how much experience he has there, but I still think it's an option. He's got a relationship with Deshaun Elliott, obviously, probably Patrick Queen as well. I mean, this is a guy that he knows how to play in the AFC North. He's a thumper, which great that you want that in the AFC North at probably at all times. Just like you said, he's not going to cost anything. There's going to be almost no cost to a Tony Jefferson. This is a let's revive the career, pay him $1 million, get him on the roster, sounds good deal. And if you could give him an opportunity, like I don't know how many teams in the NFL are going to be able to call Tony Jefferson and say, you can actually compete for playing time here if you're good enough to be on the roster come the end of August. And I think the Steelers have that opportunity for him. I think it makes sense for both sides. And to be honest, like if you play in the AFC North, if you're an AFC North football player, a lot of times you want to stay in the AFC North. Like you understand the physicality of the division. You understand how much history and what it takes to play for a team like the Ravens and the Steelers and the Bengals and the Browns. And I mean, I don't know. There's something about it that's almost addictive. And I think a guy like Tony Jefferson fits that so well. I mean, I don't know. I'm not against it. Are you calling Tony Jefferson before you're calling a Patrick Peterson? I think Cam Sutton's maybe in a different boat, but I think that's a totally different conversation. Are you calling him before you're calling a Patrick Peterson?
I think so. Just because Patrick Peterson is going to be there, Patrick Peterson isn't going anywhere. I think,
no.
Look, if there was a ton of interest for Patrick Peterson out there, I think he would have been signed already. Yeah. Jefferson, I think is different just because, he's new. He's something different. He's just not a character that, people have seen on the free agent market before. Patrick, I think it just boils down to the fact that if you want Patrick Peterson, you can get him whenever you want, but he is far from my first option, and he is not really what I'm looking for to fill that spot. So I'm fine with kind of putting Patrick Peterson on the back burner, taking a chance with Tony Jefferson first, because I think that's the one where like Tony Jefferson could possibly, I could imagine him maybe getting some calls from other teams, but yeah, Patrick Peterson, I don't think he will.
No, I it's crazy to say. Like that's so crazy to say. Is like right. Patrick Peterson probably isn't going to get signed before a guy who hasn't played in 2 years, but that's just the reality of it. Like Tony Jefferson is 32. You could play a lot longer as a safety than you can a corner. He's probably more versatile. He's a hitter, which, at the end of the day, like it's a lot easier to stay in the league if you could tackle people than it is if you're just good in coverage, because the league's getting faster, you're getting slower. It doesn't really work out that well. I don't know. I think it works out for a bunch of reasons. I think, to be honest, I think you can make Tony Jefferson like your dime backer where Cam Sutton played a couple of years ago and say, all right, here you go. Just This is a guy who could cover tight ends, who we could put in the middle of the field, who could play in the box, who could play in the corner, who could, in a slot role, in a safety role. I don't know. I think it makes sense. I would sign Tony Jefferson before I sign Patrick Peterson, just like you said, just to give him a shot and then go from there. Because I think if you made a phone call now or in a couple of days or in a week or whatever, and you got some sort of look at him, because that's what it would be. You'd bring him in for, I guess, a tryout or a workout and see how healthy he is. You test his medicals, and then you would make a decision there. And if you feel like, hey, Tony Jefferson's still got some game in him, give him a shot. I don't think the Steelers are really hung up on bringing back Patrick Peterson. I think that they'd like to go in a different direction. I think this is a different direction. I think he fits the Steelers defense well. And I think at this point, like, having options is just your best option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. You have one missing piece, really two, but I think that Darius Rush or Corey Trice could fill that last cornerback 3 role. I think right now you have one missing piece at the slot. You have options. You might as well have more options. Doesn't hurt anybody. I could see it. I could see it happening. I could definitely see it happening. What do you think a Tony Jefferson goes for cost wise?
I don't know. He's not making as much money even as Russ probably, right? Like, it's probably around that range.
No, yeah.
Right? Like, it's vet minimum or something like that. It's like, it's $1 million, 1.2, 3, something like that. It's a negligible amount. It's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, leaves you wide. I mean, the Steelers have $18 million. They could do a lot of things right now. Signing a guy for $1 million makes about zero. Makes about 100%
on a 1-year
sense.
deal or something too. And that's the thing. You're not in any kind of rush. Like, there's no pressure to. Oh, like we got, like, it's May 29th. Like, you don't need to fill this now. You have, like you said, you have options, and these options will be around for a little bit. So don't rush yourself. Obviously, give Tony Jefferson a look and just see what you have. And if you can address it now, great. But don't feel pressured to get a guy just to get a guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where the Steelers stand is whatever, man. Just go just keep testing people out. And if they work out, cool. If they don't, cool. Look at it like signing like LaMichael Perrine or Jonathan Ward. Like, there's no reason to sign those guys except for the fact that you're like, best case scenario, they work out. Worst case scenario, who cares? That's Tony Jefferson. I think you could look at a lot of guys that way. I think Tony Jefferson adds himself to the list. Would be interesting. Would definitely be interesting. All right, last thing I want to talk about here. It is May 29th, like you just said. It is way too early to be knowing anything about the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks or to be making assumptions about the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterbacks or really anything. The only conversation that you should be having is how good these guys look, how comfortable these guys look, how much development these guys have had with their wide receivers. That's the conversations to be had. There is zero indication of if there is a real quarterback competition outside of Justin Fields saying there is one, but he could say that all he wants. 2 years ago, everybody and their mother said that there was a quarterback competition in Pittsburgh. There wasn't. Kevin Dotson let us know that day one. There is not a quarterback competition here. The Steelers make those decisions. Justin Fields does not, unfortunately. Doesn't mean that there won't be one. Doesn't mean that things will not change in July. What it means is that May 29th is way too early to have any idea how good the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation is going to look, how bad it's going to look, who's going to win it, and if somebody is going to get benched during the season. That being said, everybody and their mother wants to make a hot take about the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback situation, and everybody wants to talk about how poorly Russ is going to play and how Justin Fields is going to eventually become the starter. This one's from NFL.com's Jody Batista saying, quote, that minimal investment by Pittsburgh in Russell Wilson means that there will be little to keep him from turning to Fields if Wilson struggles. Arthur Smith is an experienced and successful offensive coordinator, but any struggle from Wilson and playing against the defenses in the AFC North gives quarterbacks plenty of chances to struggle, will open the door for Fields, whom the Steelers would almost certainly like to see play before having to decide on his future. I'm calling it. Wilson wins the starting job out of camp, but he won't hold on to it, and Fields will have terrible towels waving for him. That follows a string of people who want to say the same thing, that Russell Wilson is going to get benched. it is way too early to know if Russell Wilson is going to get benched. We can't even have that conversation until we watch him play a regular season game or if he wins the competition as a whole. So I'm going to ask you this question. What is the percentage that Russell Wilson, you've covered this team long enough to know how they operate. What is the percentage that the Pittsburgh Steelers would actually bench Russell Wilson if he does win the starting job, given that he just won the starting job?
Yeah, I would put it around like maybe 15% at the absolute highest. Like, yeah. I just don't see a world where Russ is as bad as everyone thinks he is, because he has to be actively bad. He has to be actively hurting the team in order to get benched. And it has to be very, very painfully obvious.
Yes.
I think the Steelers got even the quarterback changes, that I've seen over the past 2 years, like Mitch Trubisky was that bad, but Kenny Pickett didn't get benched because he was bad necessarily. We can all have our qualms with, we can all have our opinions about Kenny Pickett and, whether he was supported or not or whatever, but he didn't get benched because of his performance. He got benched because he was injured and because of someone else's performance. And I think that's kind of the only avenue I can really see this going down, like this scenario playing out, is Russ gets hurt, Justin comes in, plays really well, and they ride the hot hand. Like, I think it would really, really take a lot for Russell Wilson to get benched. Whether that be his own, he'd have to be throwing an interception or two a game in order, I think, for the Steelers to move on from him. And even then, I don't think it would be before, week 6 or week 7. It might not even be before the bye week if that happens. I think the Steelers are going to give him a decently long leash, especially. And I don't know if the contract situation changes that. Like, if anything, no. I feel like that motivates them to keep Fields under wraps, Like, I think they have an opinion about Justin Fields already. And it's really just about what kind of price point they're going to be able to get him for or extend him for. And Justin Fields sitting on the bench for longer, like that drives his cost down. Like, every additional snap that he takes, I think only increases the price that you're going to have to pay for him. So I don't really think the contract situation plays into it either.
No, there's look at the 1 point whatever vet minimum. You got Russ for a steal. That means you have no investment to him. Okay, you had a massive investment in Kenny Pickett. Massive. First round as big of an investment as an investment gets in the NFL. You were ready to bench him for Russell Wilson, who cost you literally nothing. It has nothing to do with the Pittsburgh Steelers investment or their salary or what they want to do in the future. It has 100% to do with they are trying to win a Super Bowl in 2025 or in 2024. They want to win a Super Bowl this year. They are going to do whatever it takes to win a Super Bowl in 2024. I'm sure that was their pitch to every single free agent, to every single draft pick, to every single coach that they hired, was we are looking to win a Super Bowl right now. We're not waiting. We're not looking into the future. This is win now or bust. It has nothing to do with you wanting to see Justin Fields next season or you having to see what you have in him before you sign him to another deal. None of that matters. Like, Justin Fields isn't going to demand $25 million a year next year. He's just not. Like, nobody wanted him this year. He was a guy that at one point we were talking about go give everything up for Justin Fields. And then that became nobody wanted Justin Fields. So the Steelers got him for a conditional 6th round pick, which means that he hits free agency. He's not making $25 million a year. That's just not happening. You're going to get guys like, first off, the draft class this year or in 2025, I guess, has, as of right now, 3 or 4 quarterbacks that people will take above a 26-year-old veteran who is 10-28 in the NFL and is coming off a season where he's sitting on the bench. You're not going to have a huge market for yourself in free agency. The Steelers are in the best control possible for what they could do with Justin Fields. You're dead on. Having him sit on the bench only makes things easier for them in 2025, especially if they could convince him, hey, look it, dude, you're going to get the starting job next year. Just sign with us. Just, sign a 2-year deal, get it cheap. And then in 2 years, you could have a massive contract in front of you, and you're only 28 years old. All right, cool. Sounds good to me. Better than going somewhere else on a worse team, because that's the other part of this, is the Pittsburgh Steelers are a good organization right now. Where are you going to go? You can go to Cleveland, where things are rough. You're going to go to, the Giants, who are even worse case scenario. Like, you're going to go to a bad team, make your situation even worse. Pittsburgh makes too much sense. They could care less about the contract. Just like you said, Russ has got to throw multiple interceptions. It has to be clear as day that he is the problem with the team. That is the only way. And I have a hard time believing that that's going to be the case.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like everyone just keeps talking about Russ being bad as if that's some kind of foregone conclusion. And I don't, it's really weird to kind of default to that. Like it's not, oh, if Russ struggles, it's when Russ struggles. Like,
yep.
I don't know, man. I don't really buy that, especially at this point in the year. I just don't think that's going to really happen. Maybe it does, but I wouldn't bet on it at this point.
No, here's a good tweet. I saw this from somebody yesterday. I'm going to say this last name wrong, but we all know I'm terrible with names. Jennifer Piacenti. I don't know. I work with her, so I apologize. Sometimes I think about how Russell Wilson tossed 26 touchdowns, had the same passing completion percentage as Josh Allen, and had the 7th best passer rating amongst quarterbacks with 15 plus starts, and still got benched last season. Like, I don't know, man. Russ probably not as great as he once was. Has his issues, obviously. Hard to sit here and say that Russell Wilson is just up, it's over, career's done, he's going to stink. Like, you could have your thoughts about him, but really it comes down to he is the easiest quarterback to make hot takes about right now, and therefore people are going to make hot takes about Russell Wilson. That's just how it goes. You know, because he's in Pittsburgh, which is a hot market, he is the new starting quarterback in Pittsburgh, which is obviously going to make it even more impressive or more headliney. And to be quite frank, people are over the Josh Allen thing, so he's not the hottest name to bag on or make hot takes about anymore. It's just going to be Russ. Like that's where we are. I agree with you. 15% is as high as I think I'm going, and I think honestly, I think less. Like I think if you said 0, I'd be like, yeah, that's almost realistic. That's where we are at Russ. Too early. Stop talking about it. We'll address them as they come in, but don't sit here thinking Russell Wilson's going to stink until he proves that, well, he stinks. So we'll get there. With that said, we're going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast. And as we've been saying, please go subscribe to our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk clips for even more of the show. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.